Thank you.
Nuestros saludos,
Greetings,
nuestro respeto para
respect
el pueblo
to
de la República
the
Bolivariana
people of the Bolivarian
Venezuela
Republic of Venezuela
y para quienes han sabido
and for all of those who have been
la dignidad de ese
able
pueblo,
to defend the dignity of
desde Bolívar,
that people, the people of Bolivar,
Chávez, de Chávez,
from Bolivar to Chavez, from
en
Chavez
esta
to
fecha
Nicolás.
del nacimiento de Sucre,
And in this date
que
of
fue
the birth of Sucre,
determinante en la batalla
which
por la
was
liberación
pivotal in the
del
struggle
colonialismo
for
español,
the liberation against
en este día,
Spanish colonialism,
3 de febrero
today,
del
February the
2025,
3rd, 2025,
esta sesión, esta reunión, este
this
encuentro del ALBA,
session, this
en
meeting
estos momentos
of
que
ALBA,
son de lucha y batallas como las que han librado nuestros pueblos
within
a
a
lo largo de la
moment of
historia,
struggle and battle as the ones that have been waged by our peoples in
pero
years of history.
dedicamos a Sucre,
It is dedicated. This meeting is
Sucre
dedicated to
con
Sucre.
nosotros,
He is here with us,
así
with
como está Bolívar, así
his
como está Chávez,
force, as well as Bolivar and Chavez. Sucre is here with us.
y aquí están también
And here
con Chávez,
We
Fidel,
also have Fidel with us,
fundadores de
the
esta alianza,
founders of this alliance,
Chávez y Fidel, Fidel y Chávez,
Chavez and Fidel, Fidel and Chavez.
y nuestra solidaridad como siempre
And our solidarity
con el hermano pueblo de Martí,
with the people
pueblo
of
de Fidel,
Marti, of
Julio Raúl,
Fidel,
el pueblo
the
de
people
nuestro
of
hermano
Raúl,
presidente Miguel Díaz Canel,
of our dear brother
quien ha
President
expresado
Miguel Díaz
con
Canel,
mucha seguridad, con mucha firmeza,
who
lo que
has
es
expressed
la fortaleza del pueblo de Cuba,
what's behind the
pueblo
strength of
que
the
ha
people of
resistido
Cuba.
y cada
It
día
is
que
a
pasa
people
venciendo, cada día que vence
that has
el pueblo de
resisted,
Cuba
and each day they
el
continue
bloqueo
resisting
criminal
against
impuesto
the
por
criminal
los imperialistas
blockade imposed by
en Nicaragua.
imperialists.
La realidad es que son los desafíos que ha tenido el
These are the challenges humanity has faced throughout
frente
the
de los
years,
pueblos que quieren paz, quieren seguridad, quieren
faced with
estabilidad,
the peoples that want
quieren
stability,
educación,
security, education, healthcare.
aparecen
And that's
los
when
imperialistas de la tierra,
the imperialists of
queriendo
our planet
imponer
come up,
las
attempting
cadenas
to impose the
a los pueblos.
chains, their
Y
chains to our
la
peoples.
batalla de Nicaragua es una batalla
And the battle, the struggle of Nicaragua,
que le comentaba a Nicolás
that, as I was saying to Nicolas
en los días de la toma de la posesión de la
during the
presidencia
days
que
where he took oath,
aquí en Nicaragua,
that here in Nicaragua,
en el año 1855
in 1855
y 1856,
and 1856,
se dio la ocupación por los expansionistas
there was the occupation performed and carried out by the Yankee expansionists.
que eran los que traían toda
They were
la ideología
bringing their ideology
del Ku Klux Klan,
of the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan,
de la esclavitud,
of slavery,
mercenarios,
mercenaries,
etc.
colonels, and so on,
La zona sur
of the southern area of the US.
ocuparon Nicaragua
And they occupied Nicaragua.
y se hicieron elegir presidentes.
And they imposed
Eso
themselves
no
as
se debe
presidents.
olvidar. Eso no lo puede olvidar.
We must never forget
Eso
this,
es algo que repetimos aquí.
which is something we reiterate
No podemos olvidar.
to our
Y
people.
aquí
We must never forget that Yankees had a president in our country
se armó una elección
who assembled and organized an election
y con la fuerza de las armas bueno, armó una
by
elección
assassinating Nicaraguans.
y luego en su
And
toma de
he
posesión
imposed himself, and in his
presente el embajador
inauguration, there was the ambassador of the US
o sea, el
from
legitimado
the administration back then. So they were legitimating
estaba a la vez de imponerse como presidente en
those
Nicaragua,
who were imposing themselves.
él decretaba la esclavitud
And
en Nicaragua.
he was also approving a decree
¿Verdad?
for
Si yo no fui
installing
antes, en 1821,
slavery in Nicaragua.
Nicaragua,
And a few years before that, before 1821, when we got our independence from Spain,
enterrado la esclavitud.
we had buried slavery.
Vino el Yankee
And this is when the Yankee came with his arrogance,
gobernando en Nicaragua.
with KKK governing, the Ku Klux Klan governing in Nicaragua.
El pueblo de Nicaragua ha sido un pueblo
But the people of Nicaragua
con dignidad.
have been struggling people filled with dignity. And this is when the battles against the Yankee invasion started, as well as the battles.
Y se incorporaron a esa batalla
And
también los pueblos indígenas.
the indigenous peoples of Nicaragua also joined this
De Nicaragua.
struggle from a department that's in the center of Nicaragua. They
Bajaron de Matagalpa,
came from Matagalpa
se sumaron
to the south
a las fuerzas que
and joined the forces
la soberanía la
that were
dignidad de
defending the sovereignty and dignity of Nicaragua.
Nicaragua. Esos años.
Even then, 200 years ago,
Dando la batalla contra el invasor Yankee.
waging the battle against the Yankee. It was a battle that had a great impact against those Yankees. It was the one that took place in the San Jacinto farm. In that estate, they were resisting the Yankee troops that were led by a colonel from the south of the US, Byron Cole. That's when the Nicaraguan combatants defending, and as Darius said, if our homeland is small, we must dream big. And that's why they were defending their homeland. And they were defeating the invaders. And that's when the Yankee colonel died. And that's when Sergeant Andres Carlos, that was entrenched in stone walls of that farm, and since they had no more ammunition, he used his rifle, which had to be loaded every time you wanted to shoot. The Yankee came and he took a stone and he threw a stone against him. And that's part of our history. That stone that was thrown against that Yankee. And that's why it has become a historical patriotic date that was respected even by Somoza, in which we commemorate in all schools and pay tribute to Andres, the hero that took that stone and threw the stone against the Yankee invader. And Walker, when they were withdrawing, they were going towards the ports of the Pacific, in which they were looking for ships from vessels that were sent from the US. And they set on fire the city of Granada. And they had a text on the walls in English that said, "This is where Granada stood." So the governors of the Ku Klux Klan only left ashes in Nicaragua after they were defeated and they were retreating. And that's when Nicaragua was also able to recover its sovereignty amidst the difficulties of the peoples that would then be independent. And that's when the political parties came and started to face each other, not only in the ballot boxes, but also with ballots, with guns. And amidst those conditions, it's when we witnessed here in Nicaragua a first revolution, the liberal revolution, that was led by the General Zelaya. And this revolution was transforming back then because we were subdued to the mandates of the US empire. There were some units here of the US troops. And since we were subdued to those troops, the political parties were looking for ways in order to be an instrument of the US, and others were looking for a way to give autonomy to our country. And this is when Zelaya came up, and he was the one who brought the issue of the channel for Nicaragua. The, back then we were debating where
si por Nicaragua,
the canal would go
si
through Nicaragua
Panamá.
or Panama.
Y resulta que Nicaragua, cuando es descubierto,
And it turns out
lo descubren los conquistadores, se encuentran
that when when
pedazos
Nicaragua was discovered, they
del
found
océano Atlántico, del mar Caribe,
the path
por el Golfo
towards
Rojo,
the
hacia el
Atlantic
lago de
and the
Nicaragua.
Pacific,
Y
towards the Lake
era
of
un
Nicaragua.
paso nada más
And they were only a
a
step
las orillas del océano Pacífico.
to the
Entonces,
Pacific Ocean.
los ciudadanos norteamericanos que en esa época
And the US
buscaban
citizens
rutas para ir
that were
de la costa
looking
este a la
for
costa oeste del este de los
passages,
Estados Unidos
paths
porque
to go
estaba la
from the
fiebre del
East
oro,
Coast to the West Coast because of the gold fever,
empezaron a usar el transporte marítimo
they started to
que
use
fue, digamos,
sea
la habilidad que tuvo
transportation,
Vanderbilt, un
which
capo,
was the ability of Vanderbilt,
transportista
a very
marítimo,
famous
dueño de
sea
barcos, y que organizó la ruta
transportation businessman.
de
He
Nueva
was the
York
owner of different
a
vessels and he
Nicaragua
established the route from New York to
y
Nicaragua.
luego desembarcando allá en el
And
mar
afterwards,
Caribe,
when he
tomando la ruta del río, del
disembarked
lago
here in
hasta
the
llegar
Caribbean Sea,
a la ribera del mar
he
Pacífico aquí en Nicaragua,
moved
ahí
towards the
estaba otro
Pacific
barco de la empresa
Ocean. And
que
that's
llevaba
where
gente
another vessel
hacia
of
la
his
costa
company
oeste
was
del
waiting
Pacífico.
that was taking passengers to the west
Eso fue lo que funcionó
coast
primero
of
con
the
Haití,
US
transportando miles de ciudadanos
and to the
norteamericanos
east coast. So that's what worked
que,
in the
a
first
decir
place as
verdad,
the
no
canal,
vinieron aquí a
taking thousands
hacerle
of
daño a nadie,
passengers. And
no
to be
vinieron a
honest,
agredir, sí,
those
venían
passengers
simplemente a
didn't come
buscar
here
un lugar
to damage
de
us.
paso para llegar
It
hacia la
was
costa oeste
just
de los Estados
a
Unidos.
temporary place for them
Pero
to
mientras tanto,
disembark
ya
before
los
going
Estados
to the
Unidos
east
decidieron
coast of the US.
que estas zonas eran de los Estados Unidos.
However, the
Ya estaban
US
en
had
prácticas
decided
políticas
these areas
de
belonged to the
América para
US.
los Yankees, América para el Ku Klux Klan
They had already established
y
those policies of America for
siempre
the US, for the Ku Klux
empezó a
Klan.
promover
And that's when
la
Zelaya started
construcción del
to
canal
promote
y buscar
building
contacto con el
a
gobierno
canal
norteamericano
and he started to get
y
in
ahí
touch
entonces
with
vino
European
la furia del Ku
governments.
Klux Klan,
And that's when we saw the fury of Ku Klux
¿verdad?
Klan.
El ultimátum para que Zelaya abandonara el gobierno.
And an
Zelaya no tuvo
ultimatum was given in order to
éxito, había
abandon
miembros
the government.
nicaragüenses con él dispuestos a batallar
There were
y
Nicaraguans that were
decidió dejar el
willing
gobierno
to struggle on
por
his
manos
side,
de
but
él.
he decided to give the
Mientras
government
un
in the
día
hands
el
of a
general
weak man.
Benjamín Celedón
However,
se
that's when
levantó
Benjamin Celedon
contra los peleles y entonces
stood up against
enfrentó a
those
la marina
wimps
yanqui que desembarcaba allá
and went against
en
the
puertos de
Yankee
Nicaragua
Marines
y
that were
empezaban a intentar
disembarking in the ports of Nicaragua.
combatir a las fuerzas patrióticas que encabezaba
And
el
he
general
started
Benjamín Celedón
to go along with
y
the
a
patriotic
Celedón
forces that were led by
le vino a
Benjamin
sitiar
Celedon. And when he was sieged
en el Coyotepe,
in
una altura que está
Coyotepe,
aquí
which is a high
a unos 30 kilómetros de
territory
Managua.
that's 30 kilometers from
Cuando
Managua,
lo cercaba ahí las tropas yanquis
and he was sieged by the
llegó
Yankee
una delegación
troops.
de la tropa yanqui para
There
ofrecerle a él
was a delegation
que
of the
lo,
Yankee
no lo iban
troops
a detener, que le iban a
that were
perdonar la vida, que se
telling him they were going to arrest him, they were going to pardon his life, and that he should subdue to them. And the response of Celadon was extraordinary. And as Andino said afterwards, I will never surrender. I will never sell my principles. And that's when the struggle continued, and that's when Celadon was assassinated on October 4th, 1912. And they used the corpse of Celadon and they showed them throughout the different villages to terrorize the villages. And that's when Sandino, when he was very little, he was embraced and he waved the black and red flag because the blue and white flag was being used by wimps. And he started struggling against the imperialists of our land. And in 1928, by continuing with the struggle of Celadon, Sandino with his small army, and according to official declarations of the reports from the State Department back then, the US had sent 4,609 soldiers from the Marines with an infantry battalion, and they had reported 45 injured men. Until the Yankees had to retreat, they were not able to make Sandino surrender. They couldn't assassinate him. They had to retreat. But by retreating, they now laid the foundation in order to assassinate Sandino because he was going after peace. And with the retreat of the Yankee troops, he felt he had achieved the objective. And some comrades told him, be careful because you have to go to Managua to negotiate with the government. And that's when he decided, I am committed with peace. We had already expelled the Yankees. And then after signing the peace agreement, the president invited him to a dinner. And when Sandino came down after the dinner, Somoza was waiting for him along with the Yankees to capture him and then assassinate him along with other brothers, two other brothers. And that's what Che said about Yankees and imperialists. You can never believe in them, not even a little bit. Because Sandino had defeated them. He trusted in the president back then because he didn't have a background of an assassin. He was just a wimp that was leading, and that's why the president then invited him to have dinner, and he didn't know that Somoza with the embassy here had a plot in order to assassinate sending.
Esas son, digamos,
And those are
batallas
the battles, the
que no puedo dejar de
struggles.
mencionar porque la historia sigue siendo la
I must
misma.
continue mentioning because
El Ku Klux Klan
history is
está
the
allí
same. Ku Klux
en
Klan is
Washington.
there
Ahí
in
está el Ku Klux Klan.
Washington. We have it now there in Washington.
Lo que pasa es que el Ku Klux Klan, hay momentos en que
The thing is that
ahorca, asesina públicamente,
sometimes Ku Klux
sin armas.
Klan
Hay veces que el
murders
Ku Klux Klan
publicly without shame,
se hace como que
and sometimes
santito,
it is
como que muy
disguised
democrático.
as a saint, as a Democrat.
Ya ven cómo juegan con la dignidad de los pueblos.
That's how they use the dignity of the
Llegó
peoples.
Obama en un gesto que suponía
With
ya
Obama,
el restablecimiento de relaciones con Cuba.
we expected the reestablishing of diplomatic relations with
Ese gesto
Cuba,
lo acompañó Obama,
which
pegándole una
was
puñalada
accompanied with
caracterizando
backstabbing Venezuela by
para la seguridad de los Estados Unidos.
calling it as a threat to
Entonces,
the security of the US.
sí, da la mano y por aquí mete el
So
puñal.
they give you, they shake your hand, and then they
Luego,
backstab you.
expulsando miles de
And then they expelled thousands
miles
of
de migrantes. Lo
migrants.
expulsó Obama. Inventó
They
aquellas
were expelled
jaulas
by
para
Obama, and he
aislar
invented some
a
cages
y se vendía como
to put them
un
there.
presidente bueno, Obama.
And he was advertised as a good president, as a
Simplemente
kind president.
son los mismos. Son los mismos. Uno, cuando como Obama,
Those
otro actuando,
are the same. Some act
diciendo
like Obama,
y amenazando.
and others have public
Y
threats.
esa es la historia
And
realmente
that's the
de
story
nuestro pueblo.
of our peoples.
Esa es la realidad que tenemos que estar
That's
enfrentando.
the reality we must face.
Estar enfrentando esa realidad.
We must face that reality.
Porque ¿cómo enfrentar esa realidad?
How do we
No
face
se trata
such a
de
reality?
armas.
It's not about using
No tenemos armas
guns
atómicas.
because we don't have nuclear
Si tuviéramos
weapons,
armas
for
atómicas,
example. If we had nuclear weapons, it would be a different story.
el que tiene armas atómicas ya está protegido.
Because those who have nuclear weapons are already protected, they are shielded.
Pero tenemos un arma más poderosa que el arma atómica.
But we have a more powerful weapon, which is the awareness and dignity of our peoples.
Da lugar
That
a que
gives
lleguen al
way
gobierno hombres de pensamiento, de inteligencia, de valor,
to
de
having a
generosidad.
government with men
Comandante
that
eterno,
are
como
generous
Rafael Chávez
and
Frías.
solidary, like the eternal supreme commander Hugo Rafael Chávez
Sí,
Frías.
él, antiimperialista indiscutiblemente,
And
pero
he
él
is no
no se le
doubt
ocurría
an anti-imperialist.
ir a hacer una guerra contra los Estados Unidos o a ponerse
However,
en
he
contra de
never
Estados Unidos.
thought about
No, él lo que hizo fue
unleashing a war
con Fidel
against the US
se
or
pusieron
using guns.
promover
He,
el
along
ALBA
Fidel,
para reunir
agreed to
los
create
latinoamericanos y
ALBA
caribeños,
to unite the
empezando
Latin
por los
American and
pueblos
Caribbean
más
peoples,
cercanos, ¿sí? que con grandes
starting
dificultades
to
en
those
ámbitos
people that
económicos
were
y
closer
sociales,
to us and had
¿sí?
a
que
greater
eran
level of
humillados continuamente
difficulties
por las
and
potencias
were
imperiales.
continuously blackmailed by the imperialist
Y desarrolló
superpowers. and to develop, to the benefit of those peoples, programs to address the needs of the people, to generate employment, production, to guarantee oil production. With the weapon of peace and generosity of Christ, who says you shall love your brothers as you love yourself. That's how Commander Hugo Chavez Frias behaved, and that's how our brother Nicolás Maduro behaves. They are looking, they're not looking for ways to dominate, but rather to help, to present proposals and programs as the one we have in today's agenda that will happen along with the defense of the sovereignty of Latin America and the Caribbean, to demand the respect of migrants, respecting the human rights of migrants. And let's never forget what's happening in the US, because they didn't even know there were lands to the south. So that's when, from Europe, from England, they left Europe as migrants in dangerous circumstances, and they arrived in territories that did not belong to them. Who gave them that territory? No one. They just forcibly occupied that territory, and they assassinated their true owners, the indigenous peoples, in what today belongs to the US and Canadian territory. They were murdered and they took over those lands. Those are the heirs that have governed the US. And that's why they now want to take over the planet. And that's why we agree with this agenda in order to have a consensus of common positions in multilateral spaces, the advancement in relations with other regional organizations, looking to expand the projects of ALBA, as well with all ALBA members, as well as other countries in the region of the Global South, because this is a human project in terms of economics, the expansion of AgroAlba project for food production, the trade agreement of our peoples, and the agreement of ALBA related to agricultural cooperation, in order to continue with the framework agreement that was the legal basis for the AgroAlba project to be presented to the different countries. And the advancements of the study, development of and use of artificial intelligence within ALBA countries. And our brother Diaz-Canel was explaining how they have advanced in this area despite the blockade, despite
indisposición, el rechazo.
the policies that want to provoke the rejection of the Cuban people and go against their process. However, they continue standing up firm. Although there are some difficulties, but they continue looking for solutions and paths. And the this is evident not only because of projects and proposals such as this one related to AI, in which they have facilities that we can share to advance in this area.
Este día nosotros,
We,
como bien se ha dicho aquí,
as it has been said today,
defender los derechos
we must defend the rights
los ciudadanos de este planeta y en
of all citizens of our planet, and first of all, the citizens of Latin America and the Caribbean,
expresar nuestra solidaridad con los pueblos que
and
están
express our
siendo
solidarity with the peoples that are
que están siendo
being attacked
atropellados por la forma en que están tratando.
because of the way in which
Tenían años de estar
the
aceptados
migrants are being treated
de los
that
Estados Unidos.
had been living there in the US for years. They had built
Tratando como
a new life, and they are now being treated as criminals, as delinquents. They are accused of being drug
sin ninguna
traffickers
prueba, sin ningún juicio,
without proof, without
una sentencia
trials,
que digan
without
ciudadanos han cometido delito alguno.
a sentence that states that they have committed a crime. They are just being disqualified and then expelled aggressively from their territory.
Nosotros expresamos nuestra solidaridad con los
We
migrantes
convey our solidarity with the migrants that are being deported from the US,
día en que la actitud, esa actitud, esa
and the day will come when that trend and that attitude
antimigratoria que
that's
se
anti
ha
migration
exacerbado
that has worsened
desaparezca.
the day will come when that attitude disappears.
Lo que ha sido el aporte y lo que sigue siendo
And the day will come when they
a la
will recognize the contribution of migrants to their economies,
demanda mano
their productive sectors, because they need
país
those workers.
que son miles
They need
que
the labor from these migrants.
llega el día en que la voluntad de paz, de respeto a los derechos humanos,
And the day will come when the will for respecting human rights
se establezca también
and being
en el
human
pueblo norteamericano y sobre
will
todo
also
norteamericano.
install within the
Querido
North American people and also within the North